For over 25 years, I stayed silent about my history of childhood abuse. In fact, for most of my childhood and early adulthood, I had no conscious memory that anything had happened to me. I always knew something was wrong in my family, but I had no words or ways to describe my feelings. I started working in the psychology field immediately after I received my master's in social work. Months later, I started working as a group therapist in a renowned center for eating disorders, Renfrew Center. Most of the residents checked into this facility because they had a raging eating disorder that was ruining their physical and emotional well-being. Every day I ran these groups, residents were talking about their history of surviving some type of childhood abuse. One young woman in her early 20s told the group that the only way she was going to be able to recover and let go of her eating disorder was if she began dealing with the sexual abuse by her swimming coach as a child. Another resident in her late 50s shared that she lost decades of her life in adulthood after burying years of physical abuse done to her by her father. After working at Renfrew for a couple of months, I noticed a shift in my personality. I became withdrawn. I had panic attacks when I left work for the day. I sat in my apartment and just stared at the walls at the end of each day. I started avoiding contact with my family. While I did not speak a word about my abuse, I was able to tell my supervisor that I felt depressed and overwhelmed. I told her that I had also struggled with eating disorder behaviors starting around the age of 13. I was able to identify that the biggest trigger for me working at Renfrew was hearing about residents who had been abused as children. My supervisor asked me if I had a history of trauma or abuse as a child, and I adamantly denied such a thing. I told her I could not relate to these residents and that I felt incapable of helping them. She suggested that I go to therapy. At the time, I was mad and defensive, but there was a part of me that felt relieved that someone finally recognized that I was in pain. For about the next 6 months, I kept repeating this mantra in my head as I drove to work. I kept repeating to myself, I need help. I need to tell someone. At the time, I was not conscious of what I needed to say. I knew I was falling apart and that I had to do something. After much hesitation and reluctance, I decided to go to therapy.